So we live in an age of constant alerts, endless comparisons, and news designed to trigger us, to tickle our human negativity bias. So it's no wonder that tension feels like the constant drone in the background of all of our lives. But what if there was an ancient solution to modern anxieties, a practice that could literally help us catch our breath? Well, today, Dan Harris, journalist and author of 10% Happier, joins me to explore how Buddhist wisdom offers practical solutions for what ails us today. You know that anxiety-inducing nightmare about forgetting your line in the school play or freezing up during that big presentation? Well, that literally happened to Dan. After a panic attack in the middle of a segment live on ABC News, Dan found his way to the meditation cushion. His book, 10% Happier, guided so many others to the promised land, including yours truly.
We live in a culture that in many ways, but particularly in this way, the culture is militating against the way we evolved, which was to be in community, to have positive relationships.
So what if we have to reflect in order to connect? And what if stillness is actually the catalyst for action?
You've heard the expression, action absorbs anxiety. The world is overflowing with opportunities to be useful.
I'm Jeff Krasno, and this is the Commune podcast. As always, find me at jeffkrasno.substack.com or on email at jeffk@onecommune.com. Okay, let's jump in. About 10 or 11 years ago, my dad, of all people, gave me a small, relatively thin book called 10% Happier. And I didn't know who the author was. And but I related with so much of it. So yes, as a self-proclaimed fidgety skeptic and someone who had many, many panic attacks, but not nearly one so famous as my friend here, I related so deeply to this, and my guest here today is sort of my gateway drug for meditation, sort of the marijuana of meditation. Dan Harris, what a treat.
Next up, heroin.
Yeah. So, I think you have been that for so many people, right? Mm-hmm. You've opened the door to this ancient practice. And that's got to feel really gratifying.
It does, yeah. Compliments are weird, like my conditioning, and I think this is not uncommon, is to not take it in. Yeah. But actually, I was experimenting with, as you were saying that, taking it in. It's like that is a great feeling. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, what else you can do with your life? We've got 15 minutes of being alive. Like, so what do you want to do with it? Accumulate money. I mean, I'm not anti-money, but is that the point? Or is it like leave the place a little bit better, to use a cliche? And yeah, if that's my thing, if that's the thing that I've ended up doing on the planet, great.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's many other things that has as much utility in this moment as this practice. And that really will be kind of the topic of our conversation, particularly around anxiety.
Yeah.
So I had an orthodontist appointment, just a little window into my own life. Like, I hate anything with the prefix ortho.
Yeah.
Orthodox religion, orthodontist, anything.
Orthopedic shoes.
Orthopedic shoes, yeah. Orthopedics in general. There's actually this term orthorexia now, which is like the obsession with being too healthy, right?
So, yes. We talked about that when you came on my podcast.
That's right. So I'm sitting there in the chair of the orthodontic, I have to actually leverage a lot of meditation pre-orthodontist because it's not fun, right? Mm-hmm. Really. And my orthodontist starts crying in the middle of the session with me. And we just stop, and she's Iranian and really confused. She has a lot of family still in Iran. Of course, she came here kind of in the early 80s after the revolution, and has made a nice life for herself, but is feeling just an overwhelm of anxiety. And we just stopped, and I got up, and I was just holding my orthodontist for 10 minutes. It was really quite moving experience. And of course, it got me thinking about what we were going to talk about today, where, how do we assuage people's anxiety in this moment? And I know that I think last month you did a series on Substack. I think it was called The Buddhist Antidote to Anxiety. And I would take any antidote at this juncture, right? I would take the car mechanics antidote to anxiety. And this focused on a series of practices known and states of mind, and we can actually go into what they are actually, called the Brahma Vihara, and you led a bunch of meditations related to this practice. So what is the Brahma Vihara really, and how is it useful for assuaging people's anxiety in this moment?
Sure. I feel the need to issue just a few caveats, one of which is that I'm not a Buddhist scholar, and the other is that I'm largely building on stuff that I've been taught, most especially by two teachers, Sharon Salzberg and Spring Washam. So having said that, my understanding is the Brahma Viharas, plural, are these 4 related states of mind. That term Brahma Vihara can be roughly translated as divine abode. So like a wonderful place to abide. And the 4 states of mind are loving kindness, which the Pali word, so the language of Pali, which is now a dead language, but it's the language in which the Buddha's teachings were written down. The Pali word is metta, M-E-T-T-A. It's translated now most frequently as loving kindness. I think the better translation, the more direct translation, is friendliness. Loving kindness always struck me as a term as really annoying. It's really, really earnest. But friendliness, it's like, I can get down with that.
Friendliness,
Yeah. So friendliness is one. The second is compassion. So what's the difference? Compassion really is addressed towards suffering. So you can be friendly to anybody, but compassion is kind of warmth or desire to help directed toward people who are suffering in some way, and then, or animals. And then the third is, this is a very interesting concept. It's called mudita in Pali, and it means, we often translate it as sympathetic joy. It really is the opposite of Schadenfreude. It's the ability to take pleasure in other people's happiness, which is a really countercultural notion, and we can talk about it at length. And then finally, equanimity. The Pali word is upekkha, and the way that I've learned this from Sharon and Spring is that in order to do, especially compassion, you need to have some sort of balance of mind. And so equanimity, I think, my apologies to all the Buddhist scholars out there, I think upekkha, the word, roughly translates to like looking over, like from a good view. So it gives you this perspective, this balance of mind that comes from seeing the bigger picture. And related to that, there's been some research that metta actually broadens your peripheral vision. It's like the opposite of blind rage. So there's a visual element to all of this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, you could imagine why one might come to that conclusion, because in sort of a parasympathetic state that might be associated with metta, the aperture of your attention can be much wider versus a kind of fight or flight state in which your pupils dilate and you become very
squint. The
Yeah.
eyes squint. Like when you're angry,
Yeah.
you scrunch your face up. You're squinting. You're getting super focused on something. The way I've heard the Dalai Lama talk about this, well, I guess it would be another teacher who I've learned from, who that now I'm kind of recapitulating in clumsy, cultish language. It's stuff that I've picked up from really smart people. But the Dalai Lama, I heard him once say that when you're in an altruistic state of mind, which is another way of saying loving or generous or compassionate state of mind, you can access the brain's full, brilliant potential, you know? And when we're in modes of fear or hatred or greed, and I'm very familiar with all these, I'm not preaching from the mountaintop here. I regularly inhabit all of these. So when you're in those modes, like the mind constricts, but when you're in um, a, a more, let's just say, when you've got your head pulled out of your ass and you're not so
Yeah.
self-centered and you are in a friendly, other-oriented state, you're accessing the best parts of the brain. You can make better decisions, which gets to the question you asked that I didn't answer, which is, what does any of this have to do with anxiety?
Okay.
So in the texts, the Buddhist texts, it is said that the Buddha developed metta, or loving kindness practice. So one of the four divine abodes is loving kindness. It is said that the Buddha developed this practice specifically for his monks who were living out in the forest 2,600 years ago, well before electricity or anything like that. They were living out in the forest, and it was scary out there. There were not only wild animals, but apparently like forest spirits they were worried about. And so he gave them this practice that infused the mind with warmth as an antidote to the fear they were feeling.
Hmm.
So I said a lot there. Does that all get close to answering your question?
Absolutely. And it reminds me that I have exactly 4 spirits that live in my house too, with lots of X chromosomes involved. So maybe we could go through each Brahma
Sure.
Vihara.
Yeah.
And I also, as I was learning these, I also remarked on how much the Buddhists love numbers, right? It's like, we got 4 noble truths, we got the eightfold path, we've got the 5 precepts. There's probably some other ones.
Wait,
that-
7 factors of enlightenment,
Yeah.
4 foundations of mindfulness. I mean, the paramis. The Buddha
Yeah.
was a compulsive list maker.
Yeah, or like the 3 palm fronds on which many of these scriptures were listing. What is that? The tree Pitaka or something like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Tripitaka or
Yeah,
something
something
like
like
that.
that, yeah.
No, it's, again, this is where it will become clear that I'm not a Buddhist scholar, but there is the listicle aspect
Yeah.
of the Dharma is really prominent.
Made for Instagram, designed.
Yes.
I think actually probably something to do with the fact that much of this was an oral tradition, and it was just easier to remember if there was 3 or 5 or 8 or 4 of things. Anyways, okay, so let's maybe start with metta, and just kind of unpack the practice a little bit,
Sure.
and maybe what the enemy of the practice is as well.
Yeah. I mean, just in what you said right there, it just speaks to how like rigorous and systematic and a little anal retentive the Dharma can be, because there are lists within lists,
Yeah.
and like so within the Brahma Viharas, there are near enemies and far enemies of each of the qualities.
Right.
So it's this is like an endless rabbit hole, the Dharma. I find it really fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think your mind operates like mine, somewhat empirically, right?
Yes.
So I actually love
Yes.
the decision tree and the
Yes.
flow charts associated with it. It's like a big Excel sheet of
Yes.
spiritual psychological teaching. Okay, so what would be the simplest practice of metta, and how would that help relieve some anxiety?
So the way it's traditionally taught, and the first person who ever taught me was Spring Washam, but Sharon Salzberg is the
queen.
most famous proponent of this practice in the West. Is the way it's traditionally taught is you can lie down or sit comfortably, whatever position you want, close your eyes, and then you start by bringing to mind an easy person. just as a side note, traditionally this is you start with yourself, but in the West, given the overabundance of self-hatred, there's a contemplative bait and switch that many teachers have engineered that I'm a real believer in, which is to start with an easy person before you get to yourself. So you start with an easy person, and it could be an animal too. So it could be a pet, a little kid, an uncomplicated person. You bring them to mind. You can either visualize them or just kind of get a sense of them, like a felt sense in your body. And then you hurl 4 phrases at them. And these are the classical phrases. You can also make your own up if you want. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. As you might imagine, the first time I heard about this, I remember being on retreat at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin County, or I think it's Marin, back in 2010 on my first meditation retreat. And Spring Washam got up and was teaching us this practice. I'd never even heard of it before, and I was like, "This is the worst thing anybody's ever made me do. It's Valentine's Day with a gun to my head. This is ridiculous." I will say, before I go much further, there's a non-trivial body of research suggesting that this practice can have psychological, physiological, and even behavioral benefits. There are at least one study of preschoolers who were taught metta, and they were more likely, after having been taught this practice, to give their stickers away to kids they did not like. So it may sound like New Age nonsense, but it's been shown to work. Okay, so you start with an easy person, and then I actually do 2 easy people. I usually start with one of our cats and then move to my son, and then I do myself. And it's the same thing as you're moving through these categories of being from easy to self, and then we'll have a few more categories. You just bring to mind, I like to visualize the person, but with myself, I more just feel myself sitting in the chair. May I be happy, may I be safe, healthy, live with ease. From there, you move to a benefactor. So somebody who's helped you in your life. I usually do my dad, but can be an uncle. It can be a good friend who's helped you in your life, a mentor at work. When I was guiding these practices on Substack recently, I found it quite poignant that at least one person pointed out that they didn't have anybody in this category. No teacher, no boss, nobody who fit as a mentor or benefactor. And so if that's you, you can just like pick a historical figure, the Dalai Lama, Martin Luther King, Gandhi. Then you go through the phrases, and then you move from benefactor to, by the way, I usually sneak my wife in, which there's no category for that really, but seems like good practice for
It's
a
the
married
courteous
person.
thing to do.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. Then it's a neutral person, somebody you see frequently but tend to overlook. One of my many flaws is that I definitely am a good overlooker.
Yeah.
And so having this practice in my life has been helpful to pay attention to people I might otherwise not pay attention to. And then a difficult person, often the advice is don't pick the most difficult. But I actually, having done this now for a while, I will go right to Trump. Like for me, I find it helpful, but I don't recommend at the beginning to do that. Yeah. I'll pick the most difficult people, not just Trump, but people in my life who I've struggled with. And Joseph Goldstein, who we haven't talked about yet, but is a great meditation teacher, he was literally just talking to me about this the other day, but one of the things he recommends, especially with a difficult person, and this is going to sound a little jarring when I say it at first, is to kind of view the sending of the phrases as if you were God. Now, there is no God in the Dharma, but what Joseph is not a theist, but what he's pointing at is like, if there is a source of unconditional love in the universe, if there is a vantage point of no matter whatness, can you send the phrases from that perspective? Like, how would God view the most difficult person in your life? And not the Old Testament God, like the more compassionate God. And so I've been playing with that because people get hung up. If I'm going to send this to Trump, and nothing but respect to people who like Trump. I'm not trying to make a political point here. I'm just saying that for me, Trump is difficult. Um, the beef that people might have is like, well, I don't want to co-sign on.
Right.
The point here is, if you think about happiness, wishing wishing that somebody would be happy. Happy people tend not to do terrible shit, and so that's what the point is. Like, maybe happy, maybe safe people tend not to do terrible things. Healthy people don't hurt other people, and so that's the spirit in which you're sending this. And then finally, all beings everywhere.
Right.
Okay, so that's the practice.
Yeah, it gets harder as you go through that process, right? Because obviously it's not that difficult to send loving kindness to your son or your daughter. But as you say, Trump's also quite difficult for me. There's other difficult people. And there's there's almost an instinctual feeling of like, well, that person really is not deserved of my loving kindness. I don't want to do that.
Or am I a doormat for wishing them to be kind?
Right.
That's and I just think that's a misunderstanding of the point of the exercise.
Totally. And as you say, happy people tend to do, less bad shit.
Yeah.
But also, you can think of it as a sort of psychological cleansing for yourself, because when you are wishing ill will on someone, you're holding some kind of ember of resentment or retribution, waiting to throw it. And then, of course, what's happening? You're the one getting burned all that time. So if you're feeling that sense of overwhelm or anxiety because your feed is just filled with content that's designed to tickle your human negativity bias all day, one very useful way of actually relieving that is to flip that switch and say, no, I'm going to send you loving kindness. I'm not going to send you ill will. So would ill will be the far enemy?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the near enemy is of loving kindness.
I think it's like favoritism or preferentiality, like wishing delivering loving kindness to someone, but not to someone else.
Conditional love.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do want to pick up on how does this help with anxiety, because you've a lot of people, when I was doing this on Substack, like pushed me on to say more about that, and my own team was like, you were not good enough on that, which they're probably right about. Look, there were a bunch of ways in which I think this is an anti-anxiety pill. For me, a distinct flavor of anxiety is aloneness. It's like, just as a digression, I have panic disorder, as you know, and I've been struggling a lot with panic on planes, which has been a fucking nightmare for me because I fly a lot.
We need to talk about that.
Okay.
This has been an Achilles heel for me for my whole life.
Okay. Well, along those lines, I was doing a form of therapy called brain spotting. I don't have to say too much about it, but it basically involves staring at a spot and letting your mind wander, and then it's kind of like rummaging around subcortically and maybe coming up with memories that could explain what's happening. And so I had a memory of my mother's first day back at work when I was 2, and standing at the front door screaming as she went to the car, and looking back into the kitchen and seeing our new nanny and my little brother in a bassinet on the table, and it's like, what does that have to do with panic? But it was that feeling of powerlessness, cut offness, abandonment. And when I'm on a plane, if I'm paying attention, when I'm getting panicky, it's like I'm alone in this. I'm unsupported. Everybody here is going to judge me if I lose my mind and start clawing at the door, just the way I was screaming at the door my mother was going to work. And so I think the opposite of that kind of fear is connection. right? It's
Mm.
the kind of HOV lane or carpool lane approach to life that I've over time become a big fan of. And there's research to back this up. There's one great study I heard about from a guy named Sean Acor. He didn't do the study, but I heard about it from him. He's an author in this wellness space, and that if you put somebody in front of a hill or a mountain and ask them to gauge how big it is, and then you have them ask them the same question while they're standing next to somebody else, the hill or mountain seems smaller. I think there's so much pathos here. Like we as a species, we were, I think of our ancestors as, these hairless apes shivering, huddled together, prey animals, right? Because that's the way we started as prey animals before we made it to the top of the food chain. We got to the top of the food chain because we could huddle together and figure stuff out. Cooperate. Yes. And so the ultimate safety is always in connection.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's one huge way in which this practice is the opposite of anxiety. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to remark on one thing that you said about your phobia on planes, notice how quickly we stack bricks of anxiety on top of each other. I mean, yes, you've excavated the provenance of it as kind of disconnection, but how quickly we say, oh my God, I'm actually now anxious about how people are going to judge me once I have this freak out.
Yes.
That's where I go a lot of the time. Mine is more rooted in claustrophobia. I was locked in a locker as a kid, and that's kind of my feeling around, being powerless and I can't get out. But it quickly goes to this phantom of my own projection, which is like fear of judgment.
Yes. But it's of a piece because it's all separation.
Yes.
It's all aloneness. It's all, and we are very justifiably deeply wired to fear aloneness. And loving kindness is like, or friendliness or whatever, it just, it gives you, for me at least, it gives me this like bone level feeling of embeddedness.
Yes. And this is just another place where culture has essentially hijacked our engineering, because culture celebrates individuality at every turn, right? So from the single family home to the superhero.
Yes.
So in a way, this is a practice to actually return to our own design.
I mean, you write about this beautifully in your book, the idea of evolutionary mismatches. And we live in a culture that in many ways, but particularly in this way, the culture is militating against the way we evolved, which was to be in community, to have positive relationships. I'm not saying everybody needs to move out of their apartments and live in a commune. No disrespect to communes, because I know that's the name of your whole brand. But it's just about like developing positive relationships throughout your life. And for me, loving kindness as a person whose factory setting is frosty New Englander, just getting a bolus of friendliness in my life, doing this practice pretty much every day, has made a huge difference and has allowed me. It creates a virtuous upward spiral. It's just because I'm much friendlier in my life now as a result, and because I'm friendlier in my life, I feel better, and that makes me more friendly, and then up you go.
Yeah. It's related to forgiveness on some level.
Yeah, sure.
Insofar as forgiveness is also sort of a gift you give yourself, not just that you give someone else.
Yeah.
And that forgiveness doesn't forsake accountability. So this is why you could give loving kindness towards someone who might actually be doing a lot of harm in the world.
Yes.
But you can still send them that goodwill while not, obviating what they're doing, or not, without holding them accountable for the things that they're doing. So, anyways, because I think that's hard for people.
Yes, very hard for people.
Yeah.
I hear it a lot when I preach this stuff.
Right.
People get pissed, and I get it. I totally get it. but we can do two things at the same time. There's that old Sufi expression, praise Allah, but tie your camel to the post.
Yeah. Right.
So
Yeah.
we can train our non-ill will, to put it in the not so mellifluous Buddhist phraseology. We can train up our ability to be friendly and warm and compassionate, even toward difficult people. And we can still set boundaries, and we can still go out and protest, but we don't have to do all of that with the unnecessary resilience reducing add-on of hatred.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. And I know that in the paid element of your Substack, you actually are leading people through meditations related to this. So I want to just call that out. So if people want to go check that out, they can do that. So let's move to number 2. So compassion or karuna.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's widely understood as compassion, but do you have a point to put on that pencil a little bit?
Well, one thing that people talk about that I find helpful is like, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? Not everybody, experts slice the differences in lots of different ways. So with respect to some experts who actually do conflate the terms legitimately, one understanding is that empathy is this thing we all have, which is we feel other people's feelings. It's kind of the magic of the species in some ways.
Right.
But that empathy can overwhelm and overload, and like there's a reason why you freak out when you're watching the news, or either you wallow in your outrage, or you turn it off because you can't handle it. That's your empathy.
Right.
And
work. There's no valence to it per se. Like it could be empathetic joy, it could be empathetic.
Yes.
It can go either direction. Yes. And there's no prescribed like agency connected to it, I don't think. Like you can feel someone else's feelings, but also not feel like you want to have to do anything about it.
Yes, and also empathy is very subject to bias.
Yeah.
So who I choose to empathize with is, lots of conditioning can get in the way there. So compassion is empathy plus the desire to help. Even when there's nothing you can do, you're just sitting there doing a practice. I'm just envisioning somebody suffering and then wishing that they be free from suffering. Yeah. And that add-on, and I believe there's some real science around this, that add-on, that ennobling, empowering add-on of wanting to help makes all the difference. It's like the empathy overload can go away when you are giving your nervous system the feeling of agency through compassion. And again, what's cool about this is it's even when it's totally hypothetical, all it is, or it's even when it's just you in your mind wishing that they be free from suffering and there's nothing you're actually doing.
It's not the provision of medicine necessarily.
Yes. Yeah. But it can prime you to, here back to Joseph Goldstein, he talks a lot about this book that was written, I think in the 70s or 80s it was co-authored by Ram Dass, who's a well-known spiritual leader who's no longer with us. But the book was called How Can I Help? And Joseph talks a lot about how when you do this kind of practice, you just are in the mindset of how can I help? Yes. And again, I want to be clear, like I'm saying this as somebody who's wired for no small amount of selfishness. Like I grew up watching Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I have all the late stage capitalism conditioning. So I like to think of all of this as like enlightened self-interest. If you're walking through the world with the lens, and I don't always have these goggles on, but I increasingly have them on. If you're walking around with the lens of like, how can I help? The world is a target-rich environment for happiness. Yeah. Because being useful to other people, and again, you got to set boundaries. Like this is subtle. You can't help everybody, and you have to pick your shots. But like just little things like handing out money to homeless people, or holding the door open for people, or next time a friend of yours pops into your head who's struggling in some way, or even if they're not, texting them. I think we spent a lot of time, somebody will pop into our head and we won't send them a note because they maybe I haven't talked to them in a while. Maybe they don't want to hear from me, or I'm just busy right now. But
Yeah.
just do that thing.
Yeah.
That's good for you. And so this practice, I think, primes you for action in the world. But anyway, the practice itself is very similar to metta. You sit, eyes closed, or you can lie on the ground. Bring to mind an easy person who's suffering, and then for me, I tailor the phrases based on whatever the person is suffering. So maybe be free from physical pain, fear, grief, whatever it is. And then I usually end with just may you be free from suffering. And you just kind of move through the same easy self, neutral, easy self, benefactor, neutral, difficult person, everybody.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have a hard time actually putting my thumb on the enemy of compassion, because you could say, well, it would be to wish cruelty
Yeah,
on
I
someone.
think
That
it
would
is.
sort of, but then there's also this nuance of indifference.
Um,
But I don't know if that's a near enemy or not. If it's just sort
no,
of,
the near enemy of compassion is pity,
oh, right, because there's a
superiority. Yeah.
condescension quality to
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the near enemy, the far enemy, I think, is cruelty or indifference. I can't remember. Maybe it's
Yeah.
both.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And you can check yourself there if, like, you can witness someone in a very, very difficult situation, right? And feel bad for that person, but with absolutely no proclivity or agency to help, right? With a level of kind of condescension or looking down your nose with some kind of indignation at their situation, right? And that is just pity, right? And that's not a positive emotion, really.
Yeah. Well, check it out. How does it feel? I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't feel
that's the
great.
thing here. It's
Yeah.
like use your innate self-awareness, your innate mindfulness to test all these things. Like, how does it feel?
Yeah.
I don't think if you're paying attention, pity feels that good. Indifference doesn't feel that good. There's actually a lot of effort that goes into indifference. I noticed when I lived in Manhattan, I don't live there anymore. I live north of the city in the suburbs, but I lived in Manhattan. Like, there was a lot of energy that I had to put into ignoring all the people asking me for money.
Yeah.
And that didn't feel good if I was paying attention. So then I started going to the bank and getting a lot of ones. Remember the first time I went to the bank and asked for a bunch of ones, the guy was like, "You partying tonight?"
Yeah.
And but
Yeah.
having the ones and then making eye contact with people and giving them a few bucks, setting aside like what are they going to use it for?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
They need the money more than I do.
Yeah.
And just in my head, it's like, yeah, what if I came out of that womb and had their life circumstances, I'd probably be in the exact same position.
Yeah.
So,
What's even more fun? This is what my grandfather did. He went to the bank and got twos,
oh yeah,
$2
that's
bills.
great. I love
But then
that.
you hand them out. People are like, they don't believe
Yes.
you. They're like,
Yeah.
what's this? And then it actually is a topic for conversation. You're like,
Yes.
no, it's actually
Yes.
real.
Yes.
And then it creates some sort of something to talk about, which is kind of fun.
But just to jump in on that, sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the type of thing that historically I've been shitty at. Because I'm just like I had my head up my own ass, and
Yeah.
I'm not to say that I'm over that. It's still my natural setting, but I've really come out of that, and not out of a sense of obligation, because my life is better. The more positive interactions I'm having, my life improves. And there's actually a lot of science around this. It's called micro interactions. This is what your dad was doing. Your grandfather?
Grandfather,
Your
yeah.
grandfather was engineering micro interactions. Barbara Fredrickson's done a lot of work to show that if you can have these little moments of positive brain activation with people throughout the day, your life gets better. And your grandfather was a master. He was intuiting that.
Absolutely, because everywhere we went, he'd take me on errands a lot. Like, oh, let's go to the bank, Jeff, or let's go to the grocery store. I got to get my shoes repaired, whatever it happened to be. And he would do this all the time, and it was a springboard for him to connect with people. It was so much fun. It's a good one.
My grandfather, I think we both had Jewish grandfathers. My grandfather, Sam Harris, no relationship to no relation to our mutual friend Sam Harris, but my Sam Harris he was a carpenter, but not a very good one, and he had chopped off part of his thumb and several other fingers, and he used to go around and put his good thumb out to people and have them pull it, and then the stump would be
Oh my
all that
God.
was left.
Yeah.
And it was so funny to watch.
Yeah.
So funny to watch.
Yeah. I am smarting a little bit from this email that I sent out yesterday about immigration. So immigration provides ample opportunity for karuna, this sort of, the identification of someone else's suffering as your own.
Yeah.
Let's just start there.
Yeah.
And this was not a policy statement. This was not about any political structure. It was just asking people for a moment to sort of decenter themselves and not worry, not debate whether people are taking jobs or leeching on the government or committing crimes, or on the other side, even centering themselves around like, yeah, our country is made of immigrants and there's a statue in a harbor with an Emma Lazarus poem and all this kind of stuff. It's just like, leave that aside for a second and actually change your perspective such that you ask yourself this question, like, what would the ground conditions need to be to compel me to leave my home, leave my family, leave my country, walk thousands of miles sometimes, often penniless, to cross a treacherous border into a country that speaks a different language that patently does not want me.
Yeah.
Just try to sit in that space just for a moment. Ask that question behind the other questions. Yeah. And I did not get a great response.
Really?
Well, I think there probably were a lot of people that resonated with it, but the people that decide to comment and write
I see.
tend to not. Like, they feel that health and wellness does not belong. It's like oil and water with politics. It's not chocolate and peanut butter. And they're like, stay in your lane. That's what I got a lot of. Stay in your lane. Anyhow. But I do
don't
think
agree with that.
I don't agree with it either.
I mean, I don't talk about politics much, but what I heard you say was not a policy prescription. It was, can you do the thing in your mind that the Buddha recommended we all do, which is have compassion for everybody?
Absolutely. But I think so many people are so quickly triggered by these incendiary issues, right, that they couldn't even read past the third line. Yes. And I actually have a lot of compassion for that.
Yeah, me too.
So I tend to respond to those detractors, with some love. Yeah. I say, like, I get it, you don't have to agree, but this is what the intention was. Yeah. You understand what the intention was. And anyhow. Well, let's move into what I think is the hardest one, which is mudita. So unpack mudita for us.
My son somehow heard this expression, and I've heard him saying it to people recently, that every time a friend of mine succeeds, I die a little bit. And it's such a common thing. Like,
it's so common.
My son is on sports teams, and like, I see it's like kills him a little bit when his best friend is the one who gets the touchdown. And it's so human, it's so human. Yeah. But it doesn't feel good.
No.
Right? It just doesn't feel good. If you're paying attention, it doesn't feel good. And so practicing this deeply counterintuitive thing of, again, the same sequence, bring to mind an easy person who's had some success, yourself. I don't know, the self is hard in this one, but because this one is inherently comparative, but you're an easy person, a benefactor, a neutral person, a difficult person, and then you imagine whatever success they're having, and you say phrases like, may your happiness increase, may your good fortune continue, et cetera, et cetera.
But this one has a strange twist on it for me, because I find it to be actually more difficult with the quote unquote easy people.
Yes, totally, absolutely.
So just to set a little context for it, I guess I would describe this as feeling joy for someone else's joy.
Yes.
And sometimes it's like, I look at like some fellow podcaster that's writing about health who's just like performatively posting on Instagram all day long of how they hit the New York Times bestseller list, right? And you're like, "Ugh, how am I'm supposed to actually feel joy for your joy, but there is something bubbling up inside me that it feels more like envy or jealousy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Sharon Salzberg has this thing about how the fallacy underlying envy is that whatever thing the person, whatever achievement or whatever money or whatever the other person got was somehow coming to you and they intercepted it.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's just it's a useful frame on all of this. And so, yeah, I think, I have similar feelings to you for sure. And when I'm on my game, try to wake up and be like, all right, let me just put the phone down for a second
Yeah.
and try to send, even if I don't feel it. I mean, that's the thing I haven't said thus far, is with all of these practices, that you are not expected to feel any kind of way. And that's the brilliance of this practice. And often in loving kindness or compassion or in sympathetic joy practice, you feel the opposite of what it is you're sending, and that's fine. The thing is, just do it. Just do the practice, and over time, it works its magic. And so if I'm on my game and I see that some fellow podcaster has hit the lottery in some way, and I feel all sorts of envy, all right, let me just see if I can counter program against my programming.
Yeah.
And I find it helpful.
Yeah. I mean, when you unpack it, it's often, the feeling is often associated with the projection of your own unfulfilled potential onto someone else.
Exactly. Exactly. Or for me, like my desire for safety, or my desire for recognition, which is tied to safety in some way. That's poignant. Which, by the way, that's when you can send some compassion to yourself.
Yes. So all of these practices or state of minds are in some ways kind of intertwined with each other.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're all in dialogue with one another, for sure, as I understand it.
Yes. Yeah. It's kind of like the four primary virtues of Stoicism. I think it's like justice, wisdom, temperance, and courage. That they actually can't really exist without one another, that they're all intertwined.
It's all intertwined, Jeff.
It's all intertwined. Indra's net, once again. Okay. So the upekkha, or equanimity, this one actually also gets misunderstood quite a bit as well. So
this is where indifference would be the near enemy.
Yes. Yeah.
Because equanimity is not, and this is actually, it's kind of related to another misunderstanding. And maybe it might even be synonymous with this same misunderstanding. When people hear about Buddhism, they're like, oh, well, I'm not supposed to be attached, or I'm supposed to be detached.
Right.
But there's actually a real difference between non-attachment, which would be equanimity, it's like, and detachment. And one way this is often discussed, and again, not an original idea on my part, and people seeing this will understand, but people listening, I'll have to describe what I'm doing. It's like the difference between holding something in your hand with your fist clenched, or holding in your hand with your palm open. And so non-attachment or equanimity is a kind of, you're really in it. You're not detached. You're not pretending it's not there. If I'm developing equanimity about Iran or Gaza or Ukraine or Washington, I'm not pretending it's not there. In fact, I'm really looking at it. But I'm doing it in a way that maintains balance and calm of mind and peace of mind.
Right. I think that's helpful because it can appear to people as a very limp, conciliatory approach to life, but that's a misunderstanding.
So one of the great meditation cliches, most of them I hate, but this one I like, is that we're supposed to learn, that mindfulness can help us learn to respond wisely instead of reacting blindly. And so having equanimity does not mean, or having acceptance, it's another word that's easily misunderstood, doesn't mean you're resigned. doesn't mean you're a doormat. It means you're accepting things as they are right now. You're fully metabolizing reality. You're not at war with reality. And then you're doing the same thing to respond to it. And I mean, that's the key thing to understand. And so in the practice, what we're wishing is that other people, including and ourselves, have equanimity in the face of whatever they're dealing with right now.
Yeah, in some ways, I've grown to understand it as, bringing my full passionate self to the present moment,
Yes.
but without attachment to result,
Yes.
per se.
Yes.
And this is what I always try to explain to my wife about this, which is like, no, it's not that I'm indifferent or I don't care. I'm just simply trying not to be so attached to the result of my actions.
Yes.
Because, and I actually, I don't know, do you feel that this practice is connected to, there's sort of a Zen practice of not assigning advantage or disadvantage to any particular situation?
I actually don't know that practice, but it sounds like it rhymes.
Yeah, I mean, there's this awful, corny parable of the Chinese farmer,
Yes,
whose horse
yes.
runs away, and everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh no, how awful! What a great misfortune!" He's like, "Maybe," and
Yes.
then
Is it so?
and
Yeah.
then they returns the next day, and there's with 10 other horses, and the townspeople all come and say, "Oh, what a great fortune!" He's like, "Maybe," and then his son goes out and rides it and breaks his ankle, and they're like, "What a great misfortune!" He says, "Maybe," and then the army comes to conscript all the young kids for war, and they pass his son over because he's got a broken ankle, and everyone says, "Oh, what a great fortune!" And then so this is just to say that assigning advantage or disadvantage to any particular situation can be sometimes futile because one can't predict. So they're cousins maybe.
Well, yes, I agree. And another cousin is in old school Buddhism. So Zen is a later innovation. Old school Buddhism is called Theravada. There's this idea of the 8 worldly winds. So praise and this praise and criticism, gain and loss, fame and disrepute, and something else. There's like these 4 opposites, and thinking of them as winds, as part of nature, helps you not personalize or place too much of a value judgment on it. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
my company got bought, and also, or then 6 months later I go bankrupt. It's the wind, and I think that's it's hard, easier said than done, but it's a compelling way to look at the ups and downs of our lives.
Absolutely. And I think if you notice, let's say you get a big win, like a big achievement, you win first prize, and you feel that sense of pride swell up from under the crust of consciousness, and notice that it's the same part of you that also feels the great disappointment, when you come in last, right? And so to approach the competition with some degree of equanimity or upekkha is a more profitable approach, right? Because you're not connecting your self-worth to coming in first or coming
Yes.
in last.
Yes.
Anyways.
So some of the phrases in this practice, I think, are like, "May you accept things as they are," and you're wishing for whoever your targets are as you're moving through the sequence in these phrases to be able to be with the inevitable ups and downs, with the inevitable winds of life, with some balance.
Yeah. I was talking to Diego Perez, who I'm sure you know well.
Pablo. He's great.
And we were we were talking about equanimity, not in the context of the Brahma Viharas, but just more generally. And he said, it's not that I don't have goals. I have goals. And it's not that I'm not trying hard, but I'm, not so connected to the success or the failure. It's like, okay, well, that didn't work. Okay, well, I'm going to try another strategy, and I'll try another strategy, because I think that, we need to make these practices feel more, tangible for
Yes.
people.
Yes.
And I thought that he had a good approach towards it.
I need to get better at that. I mean, I talk about it a lot, but whether I can actually operationalize that insight,
Yeah.
and what he's talking about is something you referenced earlier when you were talking about your wife, like non-attachment to results. Like David Axelrod, the political strategist, has a great expression: "All we can do is everything we can do." And so, yeah, you can work your ass off on something, but recognize we're in a world characterized by impermanence, constant change, entropy. And you can't control the results, and so there's an equanimity that can result from not being overly attached to the results. I'm able to achieve that only episodically.
Yeah. Now, we've described these Brahma Viharas as practices.
Yes.
But are they also more easily attainable as a product of practice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I think it's kind of the same thing. It's like they are divine states of mind. Divine, I love that as a term. It's a little fraught.
Yeah.
But they are
holy or
elevated states of mind,
sure.
Wholesome states of mind, that are innate capacities in all of us, but hard to access.
Yeah.
But training makes it more accessible. And so, which is why it's key that in the training, you don't put too much pressure on yourself to feel a certain way. Oh, I'm a failure because I'm supposed to be wishing well to X or Y person, and I feel the opposite. It's cool. It's cool. Just do the practice. And over time, as I said earlier, it works its magic. And I can just tell you from personal experience, having really gone reasonably hard at metta specifically for the last 8 years, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Really helpful.
I think your point earlier around how these practices address connectedness is very key, because unlike other forms of Buddhist practice where you're witnessing phenomena rise and subside moment to moment, etc., whether they be feelings or thoughts or emotions or sounds or whatever, that these practices are generally geared towards other people or beings.
Yeah.
Right? So almost by definition, they're designed to enhance a feeling of connection.
I'm going to tell you how I understand this, but take it with a grain of salt. I think so often these Brahma Vihara practices are described as relative practices, meaning that in the Buddhist worldview, there is relative reality, the reality that we are inhabiting right here. Yeah. You are Jeff, I'm Dan, we're not the same person, we're sitting in these chairs. This is the consensual reality through which we move all the time. Ultimate reality is, one way to understand this would be to take this chair. This chair, on the level of relative reality, is a chair. I sat in it without any hesitation. On the ultimate or absolute level, if we took a high-powered microscope, we would see this is mostly empty space populated by spinning subatomic particles. And so in Buddhist practice, these Brahma-Vihara practices are relative practices. They're dealing in relative reality. I'm me sending this good vibe to you over there. Insight practice or traditional mindfulness practice that you were describing before, we were watching the arising and passing away of phenomena in your mind and body, is more of an ultimate or insight wisdom practice where you're seeing that this seemingly solid movie is actually 24 frames per second, right? You're seeing through the solidity of the world.
Right.
But both, in my understanding, lead to connection. Because with the relative practices, you're literally connecting yourself you're trying to hurl these loving thoughts across the chasm to other selves. But in the mindfulness practice or the insight or wisdom practice, you're putting the sense of self itself through a cheese grater. And as that happens, connection is what ensues. As you get over yourself and stop taking all of your thoughts and urges and emotions and sensations so personally, and you see actually it's all just nature coming and going, and I can't find any inner Jeff. That too inexorably leads to, and that's just where I think we see the conjunction of the Western word selflessness, where we just mean generosity,
Right.
and the Eastern concept of selflessness, which is we have no self.
Yeah, there's nothing reliable and stable about what's going on here.
I realize
that's
what
interesting.
I'm talking about right now might be hard to grok for some people, and
it's hard.
I apologize.
Yeah, well, this is why we struggle for the words, right? It's akin to solving an insoluble problem, because generally what you described is a mystical experience that must be experienced or felt, and then we try to lop words on to that experience. It's very difficult to do.
Well, one way to describe it that I think might be understandable without any mountaintop experience is, and this is from a Burmese Buddhist master named Sayadaw U Tejaniya, and he recommends that his students, and I've never met him, but I would count myself as one of his students because I practice this, occasionally drop into their mind in meditation or any time really, the words, "This is nature." And if you just remember that every crazy little idiosyncratic thought you have, every itch you have, every emotion you experience, of course it has to be, it's not separate from the universe. It's part of nature. And just seeing it that way starts to poke some holes at this instinct we have that we are a separate self, and that there's some inner homunculus of Jeff somewhere behind my eyes, between my ears, but you can't find that. And so just putting all of your experience through the lens of nature is one very down to earth way, I think, to understand this concept.
Yeah.
Does that land for you?
For sure.
Okay.
Well, and also we know by dint of experience, let's just take karuna or something. When we are deep in that identification of someone else's suffering as your own, right? That reliable self begins to dissolve, and you have full absorption, right? Where there is no real distraction of thought. You're so deeply within the experience of that shared suffering.
Yes.
And so I think this gives you an opportunity for that mystical experience, or that satori, that yes, moment to moment in our terrestrial lives, we may be distinct individuals with a sort of biological history, but that we are not disjointed individuals.
Yes. The way my friend Sebene Selassie, who's a great meditation teacher, she says, we're not separate, but we're not the same, but we're not separate.
Yeah.
Like we're different people, but fundamentally, we're not fully separate. Thoughts are leaping out of my face hole and going into your mind, and we're breathing the same air and exhaling, and then I'm rebreathing it, and so there is a porousness between us.
Yeah.
But we're also not the same thing.
And we won't even get into the microbiome and our shared bacteria, man, because then it gets real fucking crazy.
It does. The microbiome is a great way to understand not self.
Totally.
Because some huge percentage of what you think of as you is other beings living in your gut.
Totally. And increasingly found in every organ, on your skin, and even in your aura.
Right? In your biosphere.
In your biosphere. Because this is, of course, we use the skin as the barrier that we assign between what is Jeff and what is Dan. But that even breaks down. at the level of prokaryotes.
Prokaryotes.
Yes. Um, so here's a dilemma that people come to me with all the time, particularly kind of these days, which is I really want to be engaged in the world around me. In fact, a functional democracy is predicated on engagement and an educated citizenry, et cetera. And yet at the same time, I feel absolutely overwhelmed by the deluge of algorithmically preferenced information that's keeping me in a constant state of anxiety. So what do I do to stay engaged, not put my head in the sand, but also avoid complete overwhelm?
I was talking to Ezra Klein about this recently. I think most people know who he is,
Sure.
or at least most people in the Substack universe would know who Ezra Klein is, a great columnist for the New York Times and podcast host. Also somebody I've started to get to know a little bit personally. Great guy. He recommended. I asked him, like, what do you do about this? Because you're like in the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
One thing he does is read the physical newspaper. And he was talking about, he wasn't sure he was right about the science on this, but I checked it later. He is. There's a thing that happens when you're reading on your phone. Back to like the eyes squinting and the beam of attention being focused on this little thing. We're not really meant to take in information that way.
Right.
We were constant. This goes back to upekkha and equanimity. We were constantly like looking at the horizon, looking around, getting perspective.
Yeah.
And so when you read a physical paper, you're naturally looking up and looking around in between thoughts, but you're not doing that so much on the phone. So reading something physically, I think, is really helpful. And then also, look, recognizing that most of us have to be on our phones, and that it's hard. Just give ourselves permission to struggle with this a little bit. Every time you turn on your phone, it's you versus the smartest people in the world and the most powerful supercomputers on Earth. It's like you're bound to struggle. But if you can set a few rules around hygiene, don't. One of the great pieces of advice is like, don't charge your phone next to your bed.
Yeah.
Charge it in a different room.
Absolutely.
Don't check it first thing in the morning. I really have tried to be. Most days, I'm pretty good at this. Like at least a half hour, sometimes 90 minutes goes by before I check my phone. I get up, I go outside often, and I work on something that's on paper. So this is not easy, and none of this is easy. Everything we've talked about today is hard.
Yeah.
But it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. Yeah. To take that to the absurd extreme, the way that we used to actually get our weather was to climb up a mountain or a hill and watch like the flight of the birds.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it wasn't with some tight little narrow aperture looking into a phone. I would say that, one of the other ways of feeling useful without overwhelm is to focus on the things that you can control.
Totally.
And that often comes down to actually what's happening in your neighborhood or in your local community. I mean, even here in Los Angeles, we've been kind of the epicenter of a lot of craziness, right? And, whether it was the fires or the recent protests, and with both of them, I got like streams and streams and streams of texts like, are you okay? Which is nice, but like, aren't you going to move out of LA? Like, come back to New York, all this kind of stuff. And, and I was like, well, you're kind of misunderstanding the situation. I mean, the protests are in this tiny little 5-block radius. It's far away. It's downtown. I'm not, but even my experience of the fires here or the protests downtown, even though that I live in LA, my experience of them was actually happening in my phone.
Yeah.
And of course, it triggers all sorts of different kinds of emotions and feelings like, okay, I want to get involved. I want to help. What can I do? and then a sense of like paralysis and numbness connected to that because there's not much I can do. But I find that just being able to focus on good work with the people that you know in your own community can offer a lot of, can assuage a lot of anxiety because you've acted,
Yes.
you've pounced into action.
Yeah, you've heard the expression "action absorbs anxiety," and this is
Okay,
what you're describing.
Yeah.
And what's cool is that I think you can get active on things that have nothing to do with the thing you're worrying about. So you can be worried about Washington, but volunteer at an animal shelter, and it's ennobling nonetheless, and calms the nervous system because you feel like you have some agency. You're doing something. Yeah, I think it's. And honestly, you don't even have to do that. You can just like hold the door open for people more often, or make eye contact, or and say hello to people that you might otherwise ignore, or text the friend, or call the friend who's having a problem. Like that, as I said before, the world is overflowing with opportunities to be useful.
Yeah.
Help yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my rituals that I've adopted is that anytime a friend or family calls, instead of actually engaging in an endless kind of text back and forth, I'll just answer the call and say, hey, listen, I love you, but I can't talk right now. I will call you back when I'm available, or whatever. Just little tiny things, that I think can go a long way into really improving the quality of your life moment to moment.
I do want to jump on that because I think you're absolutely correct, and I feel I do a lot of showing up on other people's podcasts, and yesterday I was giving a speech, as I do often, to a group of people, and I am kind of overflowing with ideas for things you can do to improve your life, and I really want to be clear, like, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be big. We've talked about a lot of meditation practices. Try a couple minutes daily-ish. These little hacks like the one you described where you're going to pick up the phone once in a while or text a friend. You don't have to rip up the floorboards of your life. Little tweaks throughout your day can build up to something really meaningful. And maybe you do eventually rip up the floorboards. That's fine. Like I quit my job as a news anchor, and that's a big thing for me. But it took years. It took years before I did that. And so I don't want people to walk away from this thinking, I don't have time for all this.
Yeah, I've got to go buy a saffron robe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rake pea gravel all day. Yeah. I think, the best practices are the ones that you will actually do.
Yes.
And I think you find quite quickly that if you stack these little practices, over time, they become habits.
Definitely.
And then they bend the arc of how you move through the world. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. This has been such fun.
Let's have dinner.
Let's have dinner.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Awesome. And not only am I happy to talk to you on Substack and on your pod, but also we are now on our second Dharma dinner that we've co-organized at your house, which you've been very generous to open up, and that's been really cool.
Yeah, can we just hover on that just for 1 second?
Sure.
Because that is another very specific thing that people can do.
Yes.
Which, it's so easy to sit relatively anonymously behind a screen and try to communicate with the rest of the world. But, this is our second little Dharma dinner. And it's not hard, right? It's just get your friends over. Be creative, share. These are little things that can really, really improve the quality of your life. So happy to be in this experiment with you.
Likewise, bud. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. Thanks so much. This conversation was actually live streamed ahead of release on Substack. For more live streamed conversations, my weekly musings on health and culture, and ad-free episodes of this show, head over to jeffkrasno.substack.com. And of course, check out Dan at danharris.com. So I want to let you know about our Commune course platform that contains over 3,000 lessons now, 170 courses, so many practices from the world's preeminent integrative medicine doctors, health experts, and fitness, yoga, and mindfulness teachers. It's a repository of recipes for holistic wellness. So check it out for free at onecommune.com/try Commune. And as a reminder, the audio version of my new book, Good Stress, yes, stress can be good, is available on Audible, and you can listen to it for free as part of your premium Spotify membership. Now, if you prefer the old school analog option, well, you can purchase a dusty old scroll at goodstress.com and get a bunch of goodies thrown in, including $900 worth of courses with some of my biggest influences, including Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Zach Bush, and of course, Dr. Gabor Mate. Of course, feel free to reach out to me directly any old time with comments, questions, and criticism of the constructive variety at jeffk@onecommune.com. Okay, that's it from the Commune for today. My name is Jeff Krasno, and I'm here for you.